Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining and welcome to today's webinar, a part of the Knowledge Transfer series, focusing today on idea validation, where we will be learning about preparing innovation projects. My name is Cleo Dan, and I'm a product manager here at BlueCallom. And before we get started, I'd like to quickly run through some housekeeping items first. So there's no need to take screenshots since we'll be recording this webinar and sharing it with you in the next couple of days. And secondly, if you have any questions throughout the program, feel free to post them in the GoToWebinar control panel and we will address them at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelist, Axel Schulze. He is founder and CEO of BlueCallom Group and chairman of the World Innovations Forum Foundation. Axel started and successfully exited 4 companies, the biggest reaching $5 billion in revenue and the second close to $1 billion. He's a published author and patent holder, and in 2015 listed in the Global 100 Most Influential Startup Accelerators. In 2008, he won the San Francisco Entrepreneur Award. In 2006, he chaired the SaaS Channel Committee at SIIA, which is the leading trade association for the software industry in the US. He was also an early advisor at LinkedIn in 2003 and spent the majority of his business life in Silicon Valley. And most recently, Axel has been on a quest to discover how the brain creates and processes ideas and how some of these ideas have the potential to disrupt industries. So without further ado, and with that said, Axel, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Cleo, and yeah, thanks for joining. I believe you can see the screen. I'm not 100% sure, but I trust it works. I'm actually in a new office, and you can see the sun coming down my back, so to speak. So I guess this will all be okay. Yeah, let me start with a quick intro. Down there you see parts of our team, and maybe the one question I actually got once in a while is, you know, you should at least introduce, even though we all know you don't like advertising, you should at least introduce the company real quick, and so I will do that. So BlueCallom in 60 seconds, we are an innovation ideation management system manufacturer, so to speak. I mean, software. It's a software as a service. We come from an enterprise software as a service background. Spent most of my life, actually my business life, in Silicon Valley. And so we not only were one of the very first SaaS companies together with Salesforce.com back in 2000, but we also helped about 100 startups later on, once I exited the company, to get successful. And almost always innovation was involved. And so with these questions, so how did you do these innovative ideas? We got on a quest and finally came up with a couple of very interesting findings, discoveries. After we almost gave up, we found actually some intro in the neuroscience world, and that was an amazing ride, I have to say, to really understand how this thinking and this ideation actually works. We provide training classes for those who need to get familiar with the methods. And as you can see from the background a little bit, there's some screenshots of a product that we developed, or actually still developing. It's in a closed circle beta right now, and we'll probably open it up for public beta in October. So I don't know whether this was 60 seconds, but so this is who we are. And today's agenda is basically all about the idea of validation. And when you look into a process, you have an idea, and then you need to validate. And there's several methods to do that, from hope all the way till talking to some customers. Most people are afraid of doing this because this is also new. And the biggest problem in idea validation is actually the idea itself, because nobody knows well, this is a really, really, really good idea. And so what we try to do before the idea validation, this is a little recap, we really need to understand how the ideas are actually created. And we know it's done in our brain. I mean, every idea ever created is there, but we didn't know really how. So I want to do a recap real quick about what we've discovered and how we got to all these methods that we developed. First of all, for some, and I see from the agenda, or sorry, from the attendees list, there's a couple new names. So first of all, there is no magic idea, and ideas don't pop accidentally. Ideas are not out of the blue, and ideas are not actually really, really new. Ideas come from previous experiences. And if you see this picture here in front of you with these kind of fuzzy connections and these golden and blue balls, these are endpoints of neurons, so-called organelles, and these are actually the cells, the neuron cells in your mind. And you have about 86 billion of them. And so what these guys can do, they can store basically impressions, senses, what you hear and what you saw. They don't store, I mean, like a computer, I mean, one by one, the actual picture or the word. But at the end of the day, it's a chemical process, and it's probably meant to be emotions. And so all these little cells can do is combine emotions with other emotions. And a new idea is actually a composition of two of those emotions. And you know, there's one group of artists in our world, the musicians. They're never saying we're creating new music, because they know they cannot, but they compose new music. And that is a critical word. We compose new ideas. Now, when we compose ideas and we know where they're coming from, we have a much better understanding, you know, how good they actually can become, because it's based on our experience. And if we should invent a new rocket to moon, then some people say, yeah, because you have no clue, this is actually a good starting point. Well, unfortunately, not really, but it is an interesting starting point. And so you will want to have the experienced stakeholders as well, with in your case is customers. And when you have somebody has no clue and getting new experiences from experienced stakeholders, that is actually part of the magic. So when we get to a point that we get amazing ideas in a group of people after multiple sessions, not just classic brainstorming, but actually really what we call neural ideation, and we go through this whole process with an excellent team, have a strategy, and figure out what people want, then we get to idea validation. And so this is the topic of today. So before we even ask for funding or for the CFO to get money into our idea, or VCs for startups, I mean, it really doesn't matter whether it's a 3-people startup or 300,000 people enterprise. The process is actually the same. So we developed our strategy. We have a dream team that composes ideas. We did our needs and dreams analysis, where we try to find out what is the best possible thing for our customers. And we composed amazing ideas from our past experiences all together, and past experiences together with others. There's a lot of experiences, I can tell you that. And now we need to validate the idea. And you probably already sense at this very moment that the idea validation with that kind of background of a process is much easier. And that's what we want to do today. So when we know where it came from, then we want to go to idea validation. And there's, what I said earlier, there's one group of people that hopefully were assisting you in your ideation process, and that was the experienced stakeholders. So if you don't have your customers, business partners, and alliances in your ideation process, the likelihood that you are actually creating an amazing idea, let alone a disruptive idea, and definitely not a groundbreaking innovation, you cannot do anything. And so there is something very counterintuitive. Enterprises try to protect their idea process, even sometimes in buildings where you have only access with your passport, even if you are an employee and the guy on the entry gate actually knows you by heart. But the fear that somebody steals the idea is amazingly high in the industry. It's equally high with startups until they very quickly learn from accelerators like we did that this value of this idea is exactly zero. The whole value gets created when the idea is executed. And the idea value is actually dramatically increased. I mean, not just double or 3 times, probably 100 times if your customers and your partners and your ecosystem is part of the ideation process. So when you have already all these people in the ideation process, guess what? Finding out if this idea that not only you, but actually the target audience helped to produce, that this is valuable, likelihood is extremely high already there. So if you have fear or your boss has fear that, I mean, nobody needs to know and nobody should ever know what we're doing until the product is actually in the market, that means this company, and this is like every enterprise in the world with zero exception, spends billions and billions of dollars in prototyping and trying to get products ready for the market and then wondering why it didn't work. I mean, we're currently in an interesting scenario here in Europe. So Mercedes has basically announced his new S-Class. Very digital experience. I mean, sort of a futuristic car. And guess what? The stock exchange, the stock price actually went up 0 point something percent, actually went even down, which means investors did not notice or were interested in this new innovative car. Because at the end of the day, it was still a car. There was nothing really, really new. Improvements here, improvements there, lots of LEDs, lots of digital fanciness, application type of thing, but nobody really understood how. And those who have already tested it, and I was one of those who had the luxury to do so, I realized, yes, I can talk to the car, similar to an Alexa or to a Google Assistant. But if I don't know exactly the terms that I have to say, that this machine does understand me, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't tell me, sorry, Axel, I didn't understand you. Can you repeat? I mean, it does it once, but then it shuts off. So what I'm saying is, me as a customer, if I'm not involved in an innovative process, then the innovative process is probably not really, really innovative. So when we overcome this and we get into a market readiness question, then we have to ask ourselves, is the market actually ready for what we have? And this is not a very clear yes or no, because some parts of the market is probably more than ready, and another part of the market is not ready at all. So what do? And there are 2 classes of companies who go very, very different pathway. Take the startups. What they do, because they learned this from previous entrepreneurs and from accelerators, go for early adapters. Early adapters is a class, so to speak, or a group of people who get early into new technologies, typically ultra modern, fast growing companies, super successful companies already, because they have these people who want to do all kinds of new things and basically live at the edge of their innovation space or their own innovation space. And so this part of the market is absolutely ready, most likely. If that part of the market is not ready, then market readiness is just not there. Now there's another part is very interesting, super wants to do this, can't wait, but the boss says, no, sorry, this is too risky. And so there's a gradual movement all the way up until the entire company is very risk averse, very conservative, doesn't want to do it now. And going back to my Mercedes case, There's a bunch of people who would love to have a real digital experience, but there's a bigger number of people, at least bigger in terms of their pocket and their budget, like the fleet managers, who don't want to take a risk either. Yeah, there's some of my sales guys, they want to have freaky kind of cars, but we're a conservative company and we don't want them to run around to our customers with freaky cars. And so they calm them down. And so a company like Mercedes would say, okay, most of our customers doesn't want that stuff, and therefore we don't do it. Investors know that in 2 to 3 years, the world is different. And theoretically, a car manufacturer could say, well, in 2 to 3 years, we're probably not there, but in 5 or 6 or 7 years, we're there. But then we have this other car manufacturer, out of California, Tesla, 5 times, I think right now it's 8 times the value of Mercedes-Benz. It's about 4 times, I believe, of Volkswagen, and about 10 times the value of BMW. Why is that? Crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it was always crazy. Facebook was crazy, and Google was crazy. Microsoft was crazy. Probably IBM one day was crazy. And this craziness is because companies work, if they're smart, about 5 years into the future, and are, when they launch, about 3 years ahead of the rest. And if these companies get into the market, the early adopters would love it, the others don't. But since the early adopters have sort of like a karma, or you want to name it whatever you want, the others come, okay, they do this, maybe we should do that too. Maybe we should also buy that car. The other car manufacturer, yeah, we have that too, we have that too. Well, the only what's left is being a me too. So market readiness is a very delicate thing to test. And if you don't know who is an early adopter, or an early mover, or late mover, or laggard in your customer portfolio, or in your target audience, you will not find out, because you will probably have some or all of them. But what is key for an innovative product is early adopters, not laggards. They will come 10 years later. 10 years from now, it means 2030. And a startup has easy time for that. Tesla has time for that, or had. Now they're in this realm. Mercedes doesn't have the time. They think they need to deliver another 1 million products of any kind of product, whatever they produce or introduce next quarter. And so there is a lot of learning, and it starts with market readiness understanding. Then you ask your customer 3 questions. The first one is the problem that it solves for them. So when you have your innovative solution saying, okay, this is very cool, now I go to my early adopters, some will say, this is very cool, very interesting, yeah, a cousin of mine does this and this, I think this would be great for him. Well, that would be a bad answer for you. The good answer would, well, if this is ready, I would want this because it solves my problem of blah, blah, and blah. If they don't have, the people you interview, if they don't have a problem that you solve, then this is not a good feedback for you, because it means that this potential customer is not a customer anytime soon. But if this is a go, then you know, okay, I'm on the right track. Then the next question is, and that's another tricky question, what is the fallback option for you in case we no longer make that product available? And if you take this oscilloscope or whatever we have here away, then the scientist would probably have to say, wow, I mean, I would have to buy another one, which is not as good as yours, but that's probably the only option I have. Or even worse, well, if this doesn't work anymore, if you don't sell this anymore, I have to probably redo my entire work process. And so if the fallback option is, well, okay, then I do what I always did, well, that means, okay, there's no pain. So if the pain is not there and or the problem that you're trying to solve is not there, then it gets actually worse. But if both are there, that means, okay, you're up to something. Then you ask the third question, the price point. And ignore the order here. This is the order of things to do. The price point where you could say, okay, what would you pay for this? And you can do all these kind of things. But if you're a little bit more moving yourself into this other position, into the position of your customer, you might want to ask, if you would be my mentor or my advisory board, what would you recommend that I should charge? The question is, I mean, the same in the end effect, but it's very differently phrased. And so you move the other person into an advisor position. And now he's actually forced to give you a good advice versus, honestly, I mean, free would be cool, or some of these stupid answers. So these three questions is, what problem is it solving for you? And then what would happen if I take it away? And what would you recommend that I would charge if you would be my advisor? Are the only three questions that you should ask. Now, if you do this like probably the rest of the world does it, you send out basically questionnaires and you pump it full of 20 questions because 3 questions sounds stupid, you will not get a good answer. And what you also will miss is the emotion when the customer is telling you the story. So the emotion is critical for you to understand how important it is for your customer, which means there is no way, number one, to use in a survey. And actually there's no way, number two, to delegate it. So if you are the innovator, part of the innovation team, you are actually the one, or the team is the one that needs to interview the customer and needs to find out not just the factual results, but also the emotional results. And that is what you note yourself. And then you try to understand whether your stakeholders' buy-in is good or not. Now, stakeholder, who is a stakeholder in your world? Well, this might be the business partners, resellers, distributors, dealers, brokers, other business partners, alliances, OEMs. I mean, whoever you work with, even sometimes vendors who basically supply you with critical technology. And they should actually work with you as well on this, because they have also experiences that you may not have. So that would be a good question to ask them is, what is it what you like for on what we're building, and find out if they're ready to step in to this business cycle of delivery or supporting or reselling or distributing and so forth. Because if you don't have their buy-in, it's not a drama, but then you need to sell it yourself. And that is just not as elegant as if you have already a network around you. So then you look into resources. What resources do you have to actually bring you in the market forward? And now we already talked about all these partners and alliances, the suppliers. What are the resources? And this is actually the first resource, again, the market itself. So you may have people in your market that are total advocates, the fans of your company, fans of your product, fans of your technology. Other resources, obviously, is media. So how will media respond to that? Will it be good? Will it be bad? You don't know. Well, figure it out. And basically before you actually launch. Now, many people say, no, you can't do that before because they will talk about it immediately. Let it be. I mean, who says that this is not allowed? I mean, we're talking about something very new, so you can break every rule. But resources are important for you to understand how they can actually help you bring your product into the market. In the case of this picture, for instance, the mechanics that should implement them. Are they ready? Are they trained? Are they willing to do that? Are they excited or say, oh gosh, this is a piece of work? You know, that is important too. So then you look into your marketing. So what would it take to go to market with? And this question is relatively obvious, and you may think of all kinds of market things and advertising, not advertising, PR, social media, and so forth. But there's something else that you would need to really carefully consider, and that is the behavioral change on your customers. Is the behavioral change, and we're talking innovation, so there is a behavioral change. If not, then most likely it's a nice little improvement, but not an innovation. But if there's a very innovative product, radically new, changing everything, and that's what innovation is all about, then that also causes an initial shift on the customer's behavior. So if you look at this mouse, you know, very easy, everybody use it, everybody knows the clicks, the rollers, absolutely no problem, right? Oh, but when you look 25 years back, people did not know how to do that. They couldn't use the mouse. It was just too clumsy. Keyboard, 100 years ago when the keyboard of the typewriter came on, that was difficult to use. You know, a car with an automatic shift gear. Yes, it was an advantage, but it was different. You know, you don't have a clutch anymore. You have the gas and the brake, and everything else goes automatic. And so all these revolutionary products force the customer, the user base, to do something different. And it seems to be all much easier and nicer, but it's a mental shift. And that is what you have to consider. And that is on the marketing side, probably the single biggest line item. Everything else you're trained to do if you're a marketeer. You know, all the things and bells and whistles, and you know, you do your growth hacking and so on. But consider the behavioral change as one of the big challenges when bringing innovation to market. And then there are probably major risks, you know, and this has to do with your innovative product. So whatever it is, if this is the car, then it gets stuck and the driver got stuck and can't get out, and terrible. New airplane, I don't even want to go there. So there are major risks, and that is also something you have to deal with any innovative product, because that's part of getting it into the market. And the risk assessment is obviously with people who understand the risks and understand what can happen, and these are people you would and should involve. Because again, otherwise it would not be an innovative product if there is no risk in any, I mean, risk as risk, but if there is no risk of failing, then there is no innovation. And finally, the major opportunities. And the major opportunities basically are posing all the risks and the challenges you have so far, and they have to be very clearly brought forward. And the best is when you start with the risks and then put in the opportunities versus the other way around. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a little bit of risk and so forth. Because if you have the risks covered, the behavioral shifts, all the changes, and everything that, you know, goes against you, you may be able to discuss this in a good balance when you have the opportunities. And now you probably realize if you go as a startup and seek for funding in the early days with some angels, or later on with some VCs, or you go to the bank and to some private equity investors, or you go to the stock exchange, and in this case, you would probably go to your CFO. The problems, the changes, the risks, the opportunities are all the same. Innovation is something that changes pretty much everything. And the biggest advantage for non-enterprise people is that you have not this huge operation of risk-averse people, but you just go. But if you're in an enterprise, you will need to go too. And so You need to be aware of these situations. And all of this together is part of the idea of validation. Because the idea need to sustain and stand against all these, these challenges. And if there's something that is not really good, well then, go back to square one. And if it's all a go, then you actually make the decision to go. Will this run? And then if not, you restart and fix it. But if you make the decision, you don't make the decision alone, of course. Startup is an investor. In the corporate, this is the CFO. Both are people who seem to have big pockets, but both are people who seem to be very, very careful with the money. Yeah, they have so much money, but yeah, they still don't do that. It's the same. So you have to declare your investor, CFO, private equity company, or a venture investor, the story about what is the innovation all about, and the verification or validation of your idea. And that validation, primarily market validation, what did the customer say? What are the problems that they get solved with your product, and what they would willing to spend, and what would be the disaster if you take it away? That is the goal that you developed. And if you can articulate this well, and all the other questions, how it actually will be brought to market, and particularly address the shift of possible changes on the behavior side, then you most likely win. And so you can probably realize that market validation or idea validation is a true column of the whole innovation process. If this is weak, it will crack with almost 100% certainty. And we have seen hundreds of startups cracking, and we have seen thousands of tens of thousands of innovative minds in corporations where they get frustrated away and say, these guys don't get it. Well, if somebody doesn't get it, then it's basically you who need to make them get it, because it's all about the verbal communication. And if the verbal communication doesn't get it across, well, it doesn't resonate. But there's one thing that we mostly oversee, and this is the experience part. If you have the experience, and even if you did not, but aggregated all your customers into the innovation process, and all together you came to the conclusion that this would be the coolest thing on earth, you need to take this experience, which is basically chemicals in your brain, somehow to your investor. And the best way to do this is when you basically tell the exact story of the innovation process with your customers and all the participating parties. If you can get that across, what they said, their emotions, what they want, what they didn't want, then you probably get it across. And if you don't or don't want to, well, the chances are that you will just not get funding. If it's a startup, then the startup is dead. And if this is an innovation process that you were hired for, then you probably lost your job. So market validation is also, when you look into our application, it is the strategic part. It's almost equal to the neural ideation process, where you get to a innovation, a true innovation. But if you cannot get across the value of it, and that the market is there and waiting, well, no funding. So what the whole process of innovation is in the end is that you build what customers want. And here is a critical other part, and this is addressing basically engineers, not what you think they should get. Because this is a tendency of engineers who build cool stuff. They feel that this is a thing that you should use. And if you don't like, then you're stupid, because you don't get it, because I know exactly what you want. And this is why the best engineering teams alone will probably have trouble to get such an innovation across. But a diverse team most likely will get it done. and that was part of the previous session, if you have been there, dream team building. Because if you were one engineer or 5 engineers or 10 or 100, you're just more of the same. If you're a whole diverse team, you are different and even more different, and all these different experiences together are probably more valuable than you can even comprehend in your mind, because your mind is already full with experiences. But if you can a couple hundred others too, well, this is 86 billion neurons times 100, so that is a big number. Okay. So to sum this up, top client feedback is probably the single most important part of the validation process. What problem would you, dear customer, solve? And if they say, yeah, not me, but okay, sorry, not good for you. What value would it be if you would be my advisor? How much should I charge? And what is if I take it away? Not take it away, of course, but let's assume you would not be able to go further. What would that mean for your customers? And here's a little chart that is out of the BlueCallom application. So you see it starts here with market readiness, the problem it's solved, the fallback option, and you go to the other side, the price point. I mean, typical structure of a two-sided canvas, the resources, the marketing, and so forth. And this, by the way, is the structure that we have for every method, whether it's the strategy model, the team assembly model, or here, number 5, the ideation validation, all the way to actually a total of 15 different methods to bring the innovation to market. Let me just go further. Oops, sorry. Oops, so here. So if this is something that you are interested in, same chart like I showed before, I think the best thing is simply to give us a call and say, hey, this is getting more and more interesting. We would like to understand how you could help us in our situation, which is typically different than any other situation, and how could we run a complete project through BlueCallom. Because I mean, you may know design thinking as a model or a method. You may know all kinds of others. Actually, I have a book here, a solution book. What is it called? 101 innovation methods. So there's a lot out there. And I mean, we don't want to make it more complicated than necessary, but it's probably the most advanced model that has been built so far, because we realized as innovators ourselves, if we don't do the full length, we will not succeed. And just taking a piece of it, that might be nice that this piece works, but what's about all the rest? And so you see this innovation journey map on the right hand side. Okay, with that, thank you very much. I was asked to be faster, and I think I made it. So if there's any question, then I'm happy to provide them. And if not, then we'll roll on and have a next webinar in a month from now.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the webinar, Axel. We do have a couple of questions, so we'll just jump straight into our Q&A portion. So the first question from one of our participants is about risk-averse companies. What do I do if regulations are set in place that bump up against an innovative idea, product, or service?
Well, yeah, that is a very good question, and that is indeed something that we'll see all the time, not all the time, but often. The innovation of any type obviously need to be in the context of the given law. So there's no way to circumvent it. But I have to say there are ways, and we have experienced this in one case ourselves, that we can work with the lawmakers, with the policymakers. And that was actually in our case in 79, 97, 79, yeah, 97. We had a digital stock exchange platform. We did not know that this is not allowed because it was the beginning of the internet. And so we just popped it up and it worked. And it was, I mean, fantastic story. Cover page in the Financial Times, and obviously the call from the authorities saying, okay, you have to shut this down immediately. Talked to my lawyer, said, okay, how can we deal with that? And what is there a chance? What do we actually need? And he said, it's a funny story. I don't know either. And I think these guys don't know as well, because there is no law yet that actually doesn't allow what to do. And so I called them and said, okay, can we talk about what we need to do in order to make it legal? If this is illegal, you can certainly tell me why and where. Then we try to fix it. And then this was a long back and forth, and she finally, lady on the phone, said, okay, I have to tell you, the legalese are not quite ready for that case. It may take a year, but I still ask you to take it down, and here are the reasons. And they were all right. And so I said, for us, I do understand what you want, and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, we came to a conclusion that we arranged a 1-year period where we could run it with their permission. We on the other side would tell them exactly what we do so that they can phrase a law that makes sense and is fair. And so I say this only because there is a chance to get through all kinds of legal issues, because a legal issue, particularly when it's a policy from a nation, all that is typically, not always, but typically in place to protect the larger number of people in that nation. And if you do something that is actually against that interest, then the law is probably rightfully there. If this is not in the context of what you do, but what you do is so unique that it wouldn't work, then you should definitely talk to your policymakers and say, hey, this is what we're doing. I understand we cannot do this right now because of law so and so and so and so. How can you help us get it done? And I would say probably 30% of all nations in the world would actually be very accommodating. Another 30%, maybe not immediately, but for the same interest. I mean, they want an innovative country as well, so they would help you too. Yeah. Sorry, long answer.
Well, this next question might have a shorter answer, but it is if you could just give more details about the training program. And so I think that's what you mentioned in the very beginning.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a training program in the making, I have to say. I mean, as you probably know or don't, I mean, the matter of fact is that we started in the beginning of this year. So BlueCallom is all completely new. We're running beta tests right now, and I have a meeting with our chief of training actually on Monday. I don't know exactly when we can start. It's already on the website, so we know what we want to or to help with. I believe it will be probably Q1 next year when we can start with trainings. No.
Okay, great. So that actually concludes the webinar for today. So thank you so much for everybody for joining us, and for Axel for giving us this presentation. And we invite you to connect with us on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And with that, thanks again. And on behalf of everybody here at BlueCallom, we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks from my side. And thank you, Cleo, for running it. Thanks a lot.